Hey minions, welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and on this episode of King of the Hill, I want to talk about Shire Marshall of the Halflings. The Shire Marshall has the talent to play an extra minion on a base where another player has more power than you. This is a catch-up mechanic that can be quite powerful if you feel comfortable playing from behind, a playstyle that I happen to particularly enjoy. This is a talent which you can use every turn, but you may not qualify every turn necessarily. You only need one player to be ahead of you. You can be in second place in a multiplayer game and still meet the criteria. The only question is what minion to play, and more specifically when, because I find that the Halflings are incredibly strong. I actually prefer them to robots because of their consistent card draw, but there is an implicit ordering to playing their minions that creates a bit of a barrier to entry. The Halflings are small in number but chained together. They may not chain as fluidly as the Zapbots, but they aren't power capped, just location and circumstance capped. For example, the Quarterling wants to be your first minion on the base, and it's good that he has low power because he could lead into the next minion in the chain, Bardling. Bardling has the same restriction as the Shire Marshall, just base specific. Hopefully, you only add 4 power and you are still behind, so that you can play your next minion, which is Pestling. Pestling can then chain into whatever minion you want, again at the same base. But the use case is pretty clear. Allow another player to build up power on the base, hopefully by a significant margin, so that the Shire Marshal can start a chain reaction and allow the Halflings to rise up and overcome. As a general rule, use Shire Marshal before you use your regular minion play. This is particularly powerful against factions without specials, where you know exactly how much power you need. There's certainly an order to playing the Halfling minions, but it actually starts at the top. You can actually do these chains twice, because you have 2 copies of every minion, but this can mean running out of minions quickly. However, the Halflings mitigate this by first having insane card draw. Every minion can produce 2 other cards, and spoiled brats can top deck you with nothing but minions, so it's really easy to get them all back. And since the talent can impact any base where you are losing, it can be used multiple times with great flexibility. This almost necessitates opponents playing on the Shire Marshal to get rid of the ability, which actually creates an opening on the Shire Marshal base itself. Given how much recursion this faction has, I'm okay with this outcome because it's easy to reload and do it again. The key to this strategy is to know how much power you can add and how much opponents can add, as there is a fine line between judging how much you can overcome and being left off the base entirely. Fortunately, Last Call is a built-in backup plan for a really efficient placement, so I'm quite comfortable letting players think that the gap is insurmountable. You don't have to play the Shire Marshal this way, but I prefer to bide my time and wait for the moment where I can overtake them most efficiently, because despite all of the Halfling recursion, you can still burn through your minions too quickly if you aren't careful. Sometimes you just want to bypass the Quarterling phase, however. Shire Marshal can play any minion, regardless of size, which is interesting given that the Halflings themselves are so small. So any minion that can cross a large threshold quickly are very useful. You can just create a chain of groupies to overtake someone quickly, with or without any of the Halfling precursor minions. You can utilize a chain of minions that can lead into Starlight for some explosive potential. This particular combination lacks the means necessary to kick someone off, but you can start with a low gap and blow past them quickly. Shire Marshal is one of the closest minions you can get to playing an extra minion every turn, as long as you meet the criteria. And since I really enjoy overtaking players by significant margins for efficiency, the fact that it isn't an outright summon is not a problem for me. But there's another use case that I really enjoy that can turn Shire Marshal into a summon every turn. While Shire Marshal seems like an engine, every minion that you play increases the chances of disabling the ability for that base. This is why I prefer to bide my time as opposed to playing a minion every turn. It doesn't necessarily accomplish much, but the extra minion only has to be played on the losing base, it doesn't have to stay there. Any faction with self-propelled movement will really love the Shire Marshal. You can play Captain Ahab, then immediately move it over. Zeppelins can also pull or push the minions to appropriate bases. Using the Halfling chain, which is a base of 7, to lead into the mechanic makes the chain 11, before mechanic plays Rotary Slug Thrower and adds another 8. That's 19 power before you use any of your regular plays, and that can easily overtake a player. And if you really needed more, Captain Ahab or Zeppelin can send a minion back. If there are opponents on multiple bases, Dudley can be an excellent staging minion. You can play Dudley on the losing base and then move them off, or pull them off with your actions, then send them back when you are finally ready to overtake them. War Canucks are great finishers to the Shire Marshal strategy, as is Mountie Major, who loves the idea of coming from behind. Northern Movers also excel at pulling minions off the Shire Marshal base, or pulling the Shire Marshal away after his base gets crowded. In fact, a fun Mountie Halfling play is to let a player play a bunch of minions on the Shire Marshal base, using Northern Mover to pull them off, and then using Shire Marshal to start the chain that leads into Mountie Major, and you still get your engine and your Northern Mover to continue the combo of playing a summon every turn. This is one of the rare games where I didn't need Rude Awakening because I kept playing minions every turn and I never had the hand to facilitate the massive drop. Because of his powerful ability, Shire Marshal needs to be power capped. But that also helps his ability, as having one less power so that you can play an extra minion of at least 2 power is advantageous. But again, the minion can be any power. Shire Marshal is a great Gelf target because it can greatly increase the chance of seeing your king minion. Playing Doppelganger with Shire Marshal can be the finishing touch to break a base and search for a minion to finish off the Shire Marshal base or start a chain on the next base. Where the Shire Marshal starts to suffer is in the competing interests of other Halfling cards. The Shire Marshal's extra play is bankable, but the condition still has to be met at the time the banked play is used. In other words, you can activate the talent, but not play the minion immediately, although when it comes time to play the minion, you must still meet the original criteria. Admittedly, the circumstances where you would do this are pretty rare, just like with the Zombie Lord. This means that you have to consider cards like Unexpected Party very carefully. It could be an opportunity, but the problem is that Quarterling is a 1 per base minion. Maybe Quarterling is the Unexpected Party minion, and you bank the Quarterling extra minion. It's just another order of operations that you need to consider, but there are a lot of opportunities with this faction. I don't mean to hate on Munchkin, because it's grown on me over time, and there's a lot of really good stuff there, but I hate that this faction often gets overlooked because of this set. The Halflings are incredibly strong and have such an unusual and rewarding playstyle. Because a lot of players, even myself at times, tend to quarantine Munchkin into its own separate games, or at least use it all at the same time, there are a lot of great synergies here. The elves can make other players' minions stronger temporarily so that you can play extra minions. They function as the perfect tiebreaker. Taunters can play monsters where you get a presence on the base, but also push your opponent further from breaking it, buying you more time. For a good treasure draw, Unexpected Party can lead to play a pickpocket, as can Shire Marshal, and you can use your regular minion play for a third pickpocket, drawing 2 treasures. Cleric Halflings, don't even get me started, just don't. This is a faction that has nothing to do with monsters or treasures, but can work with or without them. It's definitely a shame that they are overlooked. I really hope that you give them a chance. If you enjoy come-from-behind victories and playing with confidence, Shire Marshal is definitely a minion you'll want to try out. What do you think of the Shire Marshal? Let me know in the comments. That's it for this week. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let's shut it down.